Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the 42nd Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Andrew Norman, Kyle P., and Mike K. Today's topic is grief inside the program, life without reservations. Hey, Mike, would you be willing to open us up on this topic?
Life without reservations and grieving in recovery.
Yeah.
So I can open up a little something on that. So, and the program that I work, it's in a 12-step fellowship, and it talks in the first step about reservations. And it says, like, first of all, the definition of a reservation is a limiting condition, right? And it talks about in the literature, in a section of it, that sometimes reservations are tucked so deeply in the back of our minds, we're not even like aware of their existence, right? We're not even aware, you know what I mean, conscious to them or whatever. So I had gotten to a point where when I was asked the question, do I have any reservations? My only honest answer can be, I don't know. It's rather than no, you know what I mean? Like, I can't think of something that could happen between right now. It's just after 7 p.m. here in Missouri, right? What could happen right now till when I go to bed? There's nothing that I can think of, right? Because of the things I've been through, whatever, you know what I mean? But then I don't know what's going to happen when I pick up that phone when it rings. And I bring that up because, you know, we've talked about courage and being prepared. And, you know, this topic I touched on in episode 25 when I first started with you guys. You know, when 2020 happened, I had no idea about the storm that was brewing. The pandemic was the least of my concerns when everything went down. The number of people that died and died tragically, and who those people were in my life. If I had reservations about using over the pain of my heart literally being ripped out of my chest, you know, I don't. If I can stay clean through that, I can't even imagine what could come down the line. But I don't ever want to feel that pain, and I've got some other situations going on where I could be exposed to that same exact pain again. And I don't know if I'll stay clean through it, but I know right now it's not happening, and I'm gonna show up and continue to grow and do the things that I did that put me into position to make it through 2020, and we'll get into that more as we get going tonight. So, what are you going to do when the storm hits?
That's right. Kyle, would you like to share on that next?
Sure. I'm Kyle. Yeah, you know, grieving in the program and a life without reservations. You know, reservations for me were anything that could stand in my in the way of my recovery and send me back out. And you know, for myself, when I had come in, I had reservations. You know, I was holding on to excuses because I didn't want to get clean. And for the first 8 years, you know, I held on to those reservations. And I did end up going back out, but I was fortunate enough to make it back in. And you know, until I gave up those reservations in 2014, I wasn't able to stay clean. You know, I wasn't able to get my life back. And, you know, when I hold on to reservations, it keeps me sick. And, you know, to live an honest program and have an honest recovery, there can't be reservations in my life because that just keeps me sick. And you know, the grief and the reservations go hand in hand for myself. And, you know, we'll definitely get more into that as the Q&A goes on. But That's kind of where I stand on the reservations. And, the people that I have helped get into the program that are still in the program today, it was one of the first things I told them when, I introduced them to the 12-step program and, the recovery community was, if you have reservations, you may as well get rid of them now because the reservations will stand in the way. I look at it as, they're a roadblock in our recovery. And it's an absolute must that you get rid of reservations to move forward. So I'll end it there, Milan.
Awesome, Kyle. And Andrew, you would like to say something on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I dealt with any grief specifically in my recovery process, when I was in these meetings early, when I was in the rooms, I would hear people so graciously talk about losing loved ones, um, being so vulnerable, and it really it hit home with me. I almost didn't think it was real because the way they would talk about it and the way they would really just spin it right on to I thought, I called my sponsor, which at that point I didn't really know what a sponsor was. I just thought it was sponsorship, some kind of money grab, right? And I'm just like hearing these stories and they would bring me to tears most of the time, because here we go again. My heart was connecting with them before I even knew what was going on. And it allows us to, when somebody comes on here and shares honestly about that grief, it allows me to feel that grief, even though I'm not really, obviously I'm not that person, but it really gives me all those emotions. As long as you're open to this thing, right? And so um obviously there's a lot of things that come up when we lose people. I have sent, I heard early on in recovery that a couple things are going to happen, or guaranteed that if you stay in recovery long enough that you're going to lose people that you love, and people are gonna owe you money. That was the other thing. It's kind of funny, and both of those happened. It's just kind of funny. But when I lost the first person I lost, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. Um, there's a couple of questions I had to ask myself, like is it impacting my recovery, right? And in what ways? Like what coping mechanisms am I using, right? Because this is something that has hit me for the first time as I'm starting to feel these emotions, and I'm not using drugs to numb them. Am I feeling any triggers from it? And who's my support? Where's my support at now, right? Like who have I put my hat in, in terms of my support network now? And then how openly am I to discussing it in sharing it in a meeting, right? I can't keep that stuff in. So grief and recovery is something that man, I heard the experience, strength, and hope from my predecessors when I first got in the rooms, and it allowed me to deal with it better, right? Because I'm seeing this pattern of people that would go through these things, and I'm like, why would they be talking about that? But I know exactly why they're talking about that, because it's therapy for all of us. And it allows you to see that strength before you're actually able to tap into that strength, right? I'm seeing it from other people, and I'm seeing it from my predecessors. So I just kind of followed in those footsteps when I kind of came across those situations. It allowed me to deal with it a lot better, right? Because y'all showed me that, look, I don't give a shit what you're dealing with. You could do it clean. Every time they would tell the story, they would go, you know what? And the last thing I thought about doing was using. It seems to be like that last thing. Mikey came on. He's like, man, all that shit happened. He goes, the last fucking thing I wanted to do is pick up a truck. Like, like it just makes sense when you hear it so much, and then you're like, man, these people are so strong. Like I can't let these people down, right? I have a relationship with them, whatever it is. So it's really a an interesting dynamic in this whole thing, because we know we're going to deal with people that we're going to lose people to one way or another, man. Because there's a lot of people that go out of this world every day that don't have a clue what their problem is. But obviously, in our section specifically, we lose a lot of people for one reason or another. So, yeah. Milan?
Okay. Well, for myself, in my addiction, it used to be a solution to you. Like it was a solution to a problem. And, I really feel that now from doing my step work, it's like I see it as really kind of the source of so many of my problems. And so when I came into the treatment center, there was back of my head reservation. My mom, who's got cancer, it was a reservation of mine that, like I was almost like pre-planning taking 6 months of just flying off the frickin' handle. And one of the first meetings we went to, the outside meetings from the treatment center, there was a guy, Josh, who was dealing with his mom, like that just died, and he was, in the program, and he was so happy that she got to see him, like that when she died, that he was clean and that he was holding it together. He was holding it together for her, and I watched someone basically live through what was my only conscious reservation. Because I like that you said that, Mike. Like that we can't really know all the shit that's going on inside our brain. Like I really liked that you said that because I rarely do know, some of the underlying things until I get deeper with these tools. So, that for me was a learning experience. And, like that's part of the beauty of this program is that we can have something like that and learn from each other's experience, and also gain strength from each other's strength in those things. Like same with you, Kyle, like, having talked about your dad last time, and, like, and those experiences give me strength to say, you know what, hey, like I had no example of clean or sobriety from adults being happy, right? And it's like one of the things I'm learning in this program is that I'm seeing these shining examples of it all the time, and it's now becoming part of my normal. So coping with life is becoming normal instead of like something I just fled like fast as I could run. So, like in my conscious mind, I want to be as free of reservations as possible. And if I see something, I want to address it and take it apart with the tools we got. And yeah. So, Mike, would you like to ask Kyle a question, and we'll kind of keep that same order going that we've done?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know. I mean, it's something we've experienced. I'm assuming I think they said something about like losing somebody since you've been in recovery. So I remember like being in all of the pain that I was in. I wasn't really afraid. I just knew that like I had never felt pain that deep before, and I wanted to do something. And I'm like, there's got to be something I can do, right? Recovery is a program of action, right? And I was told to literally do the most difficult action of all, and that was to do nothing, right? Just sit there and feel it type deal. How did you go about like doing something or doing nothing or whatever? It's just to kind of cope with that pain. Like, did you do it in a healthy manner, in a bad manner? Like, you know what I mean? What was your experience with that, with processing that pain?
Um, Thanks, Mike. Milan mentioned my dad, and that was the biggest grieving moment I've gone through in the last 10 years. And that was in 2022. I was working on a pipeline in southern Alberta, and we got a call at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I ended up missing the phone call. And it was about 3 hours by the time I was able to call my mom back, and my phone had blown up. And at that moment, I knew something had happened. And when I tried calling my mom back, she didn't answer. And my wife at the time had called me, and I answered, and all I heard was he's gone. And it literally, I was in shock. And I was 3 hours from home, middle of a pipeline in the middle of the bush. And it wasn't that easy to just up and go. And I was lucky enough that the people that I worked with knew the situation with my dad battling cancer, and you know, I had told them that I was going to return the phone call, and they said, we'll come with you. So I had that support when I made that phone call and I got the news. But my dad was a workaholic, and he had me make him a promise that, you know, I wouldn't take too much time off. And he had a fascin I'll just share this quickly because it makes sense once you hear it. Was, you know, he had a fascination with snow, and he had a construction company, and snow removal was his main thing in the winter. And I went to talk to the foreman to drive home, and he's like, you can't drive home, the highways are closed. There's a severe snowstorm between Red Deer and Edmonton. And it's like, all I did was look up at the sky and be like, I get it. You want me to stay at work. But I ended up staying at work for the day. And, you know, I had the support, and luckily I had good cell service, so I was able to reach out to my sponsor in the program. And I drove home. I was home for 2 days, made sure mom had what she needed, and we dealt with the arrangements and everything. And I ended up going back to work 2 days later, and it was not the best decision I made. You know, I hadn't dealt with it, you know, and since, like, from the time he passed up until now, you know, it wasn't necessarily the worst decision, but it wasn't the healthiest decision at the time because I hadn't processed it, I hadn't dealt with it. And, you know, my mind wasn't all there. And, you know, working around heavy equipment and stuff, that's definitely not the best situation to put myself and others in. And I heard in a meeting about a year after I lost my dad was, you know, grief is just love for someone that has nowhere left to go. And, you know, will I ever stop grieving the loss of my dad? Probably not. But it gets easier as time goes on. And, you know, you were right when you said the best thing I was told as well was to sit in the pain and feel it. And when we first started here, and I said that reservations and grief go hand in hand, when I got out of treatment in 2014, I said there was only two things that were going to send me back out. And that was losing my mom or losing my dad. And when my dad went into the cross cancer in February, he had me make him a promise that no matter what, I wouldn't go back out. And through my spiritual side and my higher power and the 12-step program, luckily I didn't have to go back out. You know, I planted my feet in recovery. I was in the middle of a 90 and 90 in February, 90 meetings in 90 days. And, you know, I dove headfirst back into the program, and I was coming up on 8 years clean. So, you know, I had a good foundation, but I didn't have to go back out. And, you know, in 2010, I lost my grandma on my mom's side, and I had 6 months clean. I ended up going back out, but I had a reservation, and, you know, I used using as a solution because everything disappeared. You know, I'd use and all my problems went away until that high wore off, and then they all came back. But the way I looked at it, and I had a better mindset when I lost my dad, was I had robbed my parents long enough of them losing their son and not even knowing who I was or recognizing me, that I couldn't do that again. And I couldn't, all I could think about was if I go back out and use again when I lose dad, what happens if that's my last go and my mom loses me too? I couldn't put my mom through that. You know, that would have crushed her. And, you know, being an only child, I had to be the man of the house. You know, I have to look after my mom. Family's number one to me. And that's what keeps me going today and what helped me to get through it, you know, family, having people close in the program and people that have gone through it. You know, I was fortunate enough to have a sponsor when I lost my dad that had lost his dad. You know, he'd worked side by side with his dad for years like I did mine, and you know, he helped me get through it. And you know, I was always able to call him, and that that was definitely what got me through it. So I bleh. Can't spit words out. I'm emotional. I appreciate that question, Mike.
Thank you.
So I'll take that off. So yeah, how did I deal? I'll kind of just get right into it. Um, I was doing, I do a lot of service. I do a lot of service. Um, should I probably do service at 5 different home groups, whether I host, co-host? Like I'm not even joking. 4 of them, I attend 5 of them religiously on a daily basis. But anyways, I have a problem with meetings, not drugs anymore today, right? One of the main meetings that got me clean was this meeting called the Global Love Bus, and I had a gentleman that used to frequent our meetings all the time. He actually claimed to be part of our home group, but he was one of the main guys at this group. And I did service. We did service together. He came and helped us out at Meeting Makers a lot. Um, really loved this guy, man. He was a good dude, really, really good dude. And um, I had gotten that call. I was at work, and his home group was kind of they were kind of dying out, even though they've been around for a long, long time. They were dying out. So he was doing a lot of the service there. He was filling in every time someone. He was that guy that would just always fill in for everything. You know that guy, the 1 or 2 guys at every home group that's just always there to fill in and share, screen share, whatever it is. And he just had this really he just had a way about him, man. He just would, but really he was really warm to the newcomer, even though he had years in, and he struggled with relapse was part of his struggle. Um and I remember when the other gentleman, so I was actually helping out at that home group, just a little bit, because I went there all the time. I would just help, sniper, bomber, snipe and all that stuff. And then I got a call from the other gentleman that he was just crying, saying that Paul, he had died, man, and he had passed. And he was just sobbing, crying. And like he was supposed to host that night. People, we had just talked to him. Tracy and JJ, we just had on the podcast yesterday, I think. Milan, know him. That was one of the first people when they started traveling. When they even talked about it on yesterday's podcast, about him. And I remember saying, "Rest in peace, Paulie." They met him, gosh, I think less than a month before he passed. They actually were able to meet him at a convention in his area, and got pictures with him and all that stuff. And he called me and just said he was gone, right? And then he had overdosed and all that stuff, and whatever. And so it hit me hard at work. I had to kind of kick it into gear at work, just mentally, and got off work and kind of tried to figure out what's going on. And nobody knew what was going on. They just knew that he had, passed away at his house, which it is what it is. But that shit was tough, because I remember I talked to him a lot. Not on a daily basis, but we were at a point where, I reached out to him a lot, and he was just one of those guys, the staple in my recovery. And so when he passed, it was tough. And there was a lot of other things going on. I had just lost a sponsee, had just went back out, and no one had heard from him. I thought maybe he had gotten hurt. I seriously thought he had gotten hurt. So it was a rough time for me when Paulie passed. And I actually threw myself into service. I actually threw myself into all the service positions that he had. Because I knew he'd want that meeting to continue, and I helped grow that meeting. Um, I'm still at service at that meeting today, man. We still channel some of the things that he does through our actions in that home group, right? Like, You know, one of his big things was never stop smiling, because you never know when somebody's gonna fall in love with your smile, right? Never stop, keep smiling was his big thing. And so yeah, that one really hit me tough. But what I did is I threw myself into service into his home group. My people rallied around me. I've got a really good support group around me. So I had 2 or 3 people that were like, I don't care what days you need me, I'm ready. Like, let's go. And we attended like the emergency home, for business meeting, and we filled in the slots. I filled in all his slots. We filled in the other slots. They were reeling for just everything at that point. And he was the only one that had his name on the. He was the only treasurer, had it the only his own. He was the only one with the name on the bank account. So we couldn't even collect the 7 tradition for a long time. It was just a real tough time. But I leaned into service. I leaned into God, obviously the fellowship, man. That's the kind of the first one that really hit my doorstep, where it really affected me. We actually were able to watch an online viewing of his funeral. Um, and it was really, really cool, man. It was really, really cool, really, really heartfelt, and really, really really sad. But long story short, man, is he ended up, we thought he had died, like overdosed, or like something had happened. He had just hit like 9 months clean again. And so we were like super proud of this kid, man. And um he ended up just he had just he just had a $20,000 remodel in his kitchen. So when he would sit on screen, he would have his kitchen in the background. He loved cooking. Dude loved cooking. And he ended up just slipping and falling on a really sharp knife, right? And bleeding out. So he died with his infinity chip, right? Like it was like a big thing in the rooms, where like everyone thought he had something with drugs, but he didn't. But that's kind of like the first one that kind of came up. I threw myself into service. I'm still at service at that meeting. I kind of, it's there's something that says that those that leave us, that don't go away, they walk with us every day, right? The ones that we love, right? They walk with us every day. They don't go away. And grief is the price we pay for love, as I've heard that too. So I haven't lost anybody like you two gentlemen have. I have, but I haven't. But nothing in the way that y'all two have. But I feel it from all of you guys. Whenever I hear you talk about it, man, my heart's inside y'all's chest. So just love you guys, man, and thank you for coming on here and being vulnerable with us today, man. So, Milan.
Yeah, so I lost somebody really valuable to me to overdose before I was in the program. And from doing the steps, it was actually like I was able to grieve him this summer that just passed. Like I was too fucked up to process the loss and not make it about myself or using and my addiction, and that was a real problem, that it wasn't even my life that was gone, and I was making it about me. And the same thing was happening with my 3 parents. Like that's the self-centeredness that just like blows me away when I actually get to step back and look at it. And I was grieving my 3 parents that lived with us before they were gone, because they've all had something, whether it's strokes or cancer or this or that. And that's really turned around as well, in that it's like, first of all, I'm feeling acceptance that if they do pass, that they've had the life that, it's been a really amazing gift for them, but for us too, you know? Like my stepfather started saying, about 9 months ago, like, I think I'm done. And at first I was reacting selfishly. I was like, no, we're not done with you. And now it's like I could see he's not enjoying things. Like he's getting just so old. It's hard to move. It's hard, like there's just things about life that just aren't enjoyable anymore. And it's like to me now, I'm finally able to say, hey, like I'm okay with you having whatever you want because you deserve it. And so that's kind of been my experience with it inside the program itself. And now, Kyle, do you got a question you'd like to ask Andrew? And we'll keep going around.
I do. What do you want about reservations? When you came into the program, Andrew, did you know you had reservations, or did you have to hang around for a while around the rooms and to figure out what reservations were, or to figure out if you had any?
That's a good question, Kyle. Thank you for being here again, man. I love you, bro.
You do.
Yeah, I knew I had. I mean, internally, I knew I had reservations. I didn't know what they were called, what they were, why I had them, anything like that. I knew, I knew I was fucked up, right? I knew, so call it a reservation, call it a, whatever you want to call it. I wasn't right. I won't right. Right. So, I knew when I came in here, God, when I saw people happy, man, when I first saw that, that group of H&I men that walked into my rehab center and they were heads held high, smelling good, grateful to be there in a room full of 80 addicts. Like I knew they had changed their life in ways because I had heard, they're telling me their story. I'm like, these dudes are way worse than I was, and I thought I was the worst. And then they're talking about being, having full blown families and golfing on Sundays and being grateful to be here on a Friday night and coming back on another Friday night being grateful. And I'm just like, something's up here, right? Like, I can be that person. I don't know how to get there, but I can be that person. And so I didn't know about reservations or I didn't know how to tackle reservations. I didn't know anything about them, man. But y'all came in here, man. We keep reading these readings, and eventually, man, if you're open to it, the shit starts taking. You start hearing a little bit of it, right? And you start going, man, like what if I did a little work on myself? What if I did a little bit of step work? What if I did get a sponsor? What if I did share about that really tricky shit that I dealt with today? And then you start realizing how a lot of this shit that you're going through is, man, like we think we got a problem with drugs. We think we're not drug addicts. We have an us problem, man. Like it is us, right? But as soon as I've been thinking about this a lot lately, man. People that don't read the literature, then come into these rooms, good luck, man. Good luck, because something as simple as my literature telling me that I'm not responsible for my disease is is a whole different outlook coming into this thing than like just being like, fuck, now I got to get off drugs and I'm an asshole. Like how am I going to do it? Like you're telling me, like, one simple sentence in the literature is going to tell me I'm relieved of all that shit I've done in the past in terms of my disease. It's one simple line. And so as I read more and more about it, like, and I read that like it's a me problem. Like as I thought out, man, like my character defects are coming out way worse clean than when I was in my active addiction. Now, whether it's just because I noticed them, I'm not, and that could be a thing of it too, because I'm sure my character defects were running wild in my active addiction. Actually, I know they were, but I'm just in that fog, right? I'm in the grip, so I can't really, and I don't have a program. I don't have a way to think about my actions or my decisions. But now I have a systematic way where I can be like, step 1, 2, and 3, right? There's your surrender, identify, and turn it over. I can use that for every decision I make throughout the day. Step 1, 2, and 3. Surrender, identify the problem, and turn it over. And if I can do something about it, I can. If not, I can't. And just keep, pray about it. Give it over. So, I didn't know. I just knew I was fucked up. I'm still fucked up, Kyle. I think we all have our shit, right? But like I have a program now where I can work on it. I've got a sponsor that like knows what I've been through. I've got people around me that know what I've been through, that can teach me about that and how to work on those, right? If I have defects or reservations, I'm gonna work on the opposite of those things. I'm gonna work on taking care of those things, man, because they all get stored up in that cell in my mind, and I don't even know it, man. And we just bog ourselves down with that shit, man. We think it just kind of goes out the window, and it gets stored up there, man, and we will fucking fall over quick. That shit gets heavy in our minds, man. It gets heavy in our minds. So I have step work. I've got people around me I can talk to about it, man. Just coming on a meeting and sharing something about what I'm going through, but like Mikey said, come on a meeting and tell people 5 years clean that you don't know, have a fucking clue what you're doing, and you see what happens after that, right? Like it's just magical things that came into this program. So I knew I had something. I knew I had some effed up shit going on in my head and I wasn't right. And I was either going to die, go back to what I was doing and die, or be in the jail, and jail wasn't for me. I'd have done something stupid before I went to jail. And, I'm just not cut out for that shit, man. And so, now I can deal with that shit on a daily basis, man. I can do a daily inventory, man. And talk about reservations. I can stay on top of them, man. I can stay in front of them now, right? I've done a round of the steps, doing the second round of the steps, but like I can stay ahead of them and I can be conscious of them today. So without this program, I would have no clue what I was doing, or about my reservations, or how to correct them, or how to do anything about them, Kyle. If I wouldn't have been in this program, and I wouldn't learn from gentlemen like all of you here. So yeah, I knew I had something going on. I knew I had to fix a lot of reservations, and I'm still working on them things, man, because I'm still fucked up. My brain still wants me alone at night. It wants me dead. So that's my answer.
Thanks, Andrew.
Nice.
Buddy.
And can you repeat the question, Kyle? Brian, the absent-minded addict.
Microphone.
The question was, did you know you had reservations coming into the program, or did you have to spend some time around the rooms to figure out you had reservations?
Quick answer was did not know, because I knew not what a reservation was. Like, it was a
Fair enough.
time I'd show up at the restaurant, right? But as soon as I did know what it was, I knew that there was the one about my mom. Like, I remember saying to my wife, even in like the last year of my addiction, I was like, man, we better have some cash stored because I'm going off the rails if that happens. Like, I literally remember saying that sentence. But like right now, I feel like there were so many reservations wrapped inside my resentments. Like, I would react a certain way if you did something and I would feel justified for it. And it was like a reservation to allow my defects to run rampant and make me act out in shortcomings, and like it's something for me that's still a struggle on a day-to-day basis of like, am I entirely ready to have these shortcomings removed? And it's like, there's a lot of them I want removed. And then there's a lot of them that I'm finding little reservations of allowing that to start to happen. It's a really tough one inside that scope for me, at least anyway. But coming in, really, I mean, I knew I had that one about my mom, and other than that, I don't think that there was another one though that had as hard of a line. Like, she's kind of been one of the most important people in my whole life. And I didn't have a dad growing up, so that was the main one for me, for sure. Mike?
So when I first came to recovery, I can't say that I had reservations because I had no intentions on sticking around. I had plans, right? I was still convinced I could control my using. I just had to be really careful, I didn't, I was still convinced that alcohol was a fallback thing for me. So, I would just be safe and go out of town. And when I wanted to do some harder things, and there were certain things I wasn't gonna do, but when I did, I'd make sure I went on a camping trip or something. I was way out in the woods, right? Like I had no intentions on sticking around. I don't know, till I was around probably 6 months clean. At which time I got involved with sponsorship and all of that. And we had talked about, the question came up about reservations. I had been really expecting a phone call about my mom since the time I was like 16. And I got clean when I was 35, 34. And so when I was answering these questions, I wasn't sure. Yeah, you know what I mean? I hadn't been around enough. I hadn't experienced relationships with people that had been around to see them go through things. So I was like, I'm not sure about mom. I think I could probably get through it, you know what I mean, if she died, but like, yeah, so I'm not really sure about that one. And my son. Um, I'm not saying that I would, but that is something that I definitely could use over. And like I hung out for a little bit. My first sponsor, I watched him help his father with end of life services and be right there by his side till the moment he died, and he stayed strong, but like I paid attention to what he did. Um, I and I watched his best friend go through it with a family member. And then after I would think I was in my first 2 years, maybe a little bit after that. A woman I had met, like she had me share at her 25-year anniversary. And it meant a lot to me. Um, not just because it was her 25 years, but because a couple months before that, her son was murdered. Right? And she stayed clean through it. Like I was sharing at her 25-year anniversary. So I knew right then and there, like that reservation was gone. You know what I mean? I had talked about it and then I saw somebody go through it. Um, I saw multiple people go through it with their parents. And and then like, the thought never occurred, what about these deep intimate relationships that I'm developing today, right? And there was the two gentlemen with the most clean time in our area when I got clean was my sponsor and his best friend. And his best friend Bob was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And we watched him lose a struggle with that, right? And I watched people stay clean. And I had no idea that like seeing all of this stuff, right? It's my belief that everything that I go through has nothing to do with me and everything to do with somebody that's watching me that might not even be around yet. Um, and it was all setting me up, like watching all these things happen and removing what I had for reservations if I had them, and also ones that I might not have for future things that were coming up. So, yeah, it took me a little while to identify that I did, but it was easy to get rid of that just from watching all you guys that came before me and after me that made it through it without doing anything stupid. So.
And Kyle, you want to answer your own question there?
Yeah, I'll do that. You've definitely made the wheels turn hearing everybody's response. I was fortunate enough to have experience with, the program and the 12 steps. And, the first podcast that you guys brought me on, I had shared my story about having to come in and, I was introduced to the 12 steps in the program because I had to get a paper signed. And, I'd gotten some trouble and I had to come get a paper signed. And, I didn't want to be there. And fast forward, it helped me. I'd come in and out 5 or 6 times, 6 times before I finally stuck around. And I was able to, hear these words, reservations, and, what other people had gone through and what they were. And, I knew before I came in for myself that I had reservations, and when I went to treatment in 2014, I was fortunate enough to, go through the 12 steps in the treatment center, and then I still didn't feel ready. So I was able to stay for an additional 3 months or a month and a half, I guess it was, and do cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was able to deal with those reservations. That's where I learned that, they will keep me sick. And, the counselor that I had was awesome. And, he told me, you have reservations And the two main ones, like losing my mom and dad, he said, you can't think that far ahead, you know? It's a one day at a time program, and you know, you might have 3 days left with them, you might have 10 years left with them, you might have 20 years left with them. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to have another 8 years with my dad when I got out of treatment. You know, I was, well, 7, I guess. Um, I was able to, you know, have some clean time under my belt and, you know, have a good foundation in my recovery when the time did come that I lost dad. And, you know, I think that was honestly a blessing in disguise when I look back on it, because, you know, if that would have been my first year, I honestly, to be 100% honest, can't say I'd be sitting here today. You know, I I was able to, you know, have that support system. I had been to hundreds of meetings in, you know, the 7 years, and met so many people. And, you know, I heard about so many people losing their parents. And, you know, I made sure that I got those people's info and, you know, connected with them even before I lost dad. And, you know, those are the people that I reached out to when I lost dad. And, you know, I was able to ask them how they did it. And, you know, 99% of them that I talked to said, get your ass to a meeting. And, you know, the day that I got that phone call, I was in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta. And as soon as I got done work, I went to a meeting. And, you know, I didn't sleep much that night. I spent a lot of the time on the phone because I was, you know, I didn't have the reservation, but I was still scared shitless, you know. That addict brain of mine, you know, wants every excuse for me to fail. And, you know, what better way than losing a parent? And, you know, I sat on the phone long enough that, you know, I was able to stay clean. And that's a big thing for me because I I've spent enough time around Andrew and Milan. You know, a lot of people don't think I was the guy that couldn't pick up the phone, but I really struggled with that. And, you know, that's what kept me clean. And, you know, I had lost people in the program. In 2016, I was 2 years clean, and actually, I was up in Fort St. John where I am now working. And, you know, I had a couple service positions. I was a GSR of the meeting up here, and, you know, there was a guy that came in and he was struggling, and, you know, we both worked oil field and we related on that, and, you know, kind of our values and morals and things lined up, and he asked me to be his sponsor, and I said yes. And, you know, he was good for a while, and he called me one night. I was 2 hours north of Fort St. John in camp, and I didn't have the best cell service, so I ended up having a text come through from him saying that he was struggling and he needed to talk on the phone. So I jumped in my truck and I drove to the highway, and we had a 2 hour phone call, and he ended it with, thank you for all you've done for me. And I told him, you know, he was talking about taking his own life, and we had become real good friends, and it was hard hearing that. And, you know, I asked him before we got off the phone if he was in a good headspace, and he said yes. And I said if that changes to call me or text me again. And we hung up the phone, and that was the last time I heard from him. He ended up taking his own life that night. And, you know, I carried that for a long time, and it still bothers me to this day, you know. But unfortunately, that's part of this program, you know. when you take on that role of being a sponsor, you know, that comes with it. That's part of it, you know. Some people are going to make it and some people aren't. And that was a realization for me. And I've lost, you know, I can't even count how many people I've lost that were close to me in this program because of this disease. And, you know, out of 21 people that were in the program or in the treatment center with me, there's 3 of us that are still alive. And that just shows how powerful this disease is. And there was a young kid he was 19 years old, and you know, he was a heroin addict, and I had finished my program in the steps, and I was in the treatment center for the CBT, and I was there for his graduation, and you know, he was one of the ones that I thought was going to get it. And you know, he spoke so highly of, you know, recovery and staying clean and his mom and dad, and he graduated that one afternoon. He lived an hour and a half from the treatment center we were at, and 3 hours after his graduation, he overdosed. And, you know, I had talked to the counselor about it when I was in there, and the counselor told me he had a reservation. You know, the way it was put to me was, you know, he was getting clean for his parents. You know, he said, Brandon was his name, and he told me that, you know, he was there because his parents asked him to come. And I could relate with that because I had gone in and out for 5-6 years doing it for everybody but myself. So, you know, I could relate with that. And, you know, he didn't want to be there for him. And, you know, he had that reservation. He had no plans on staying clean. And, you know, he got out and he made that phone call, and unfortunately he's not here today. So, you know, this disease wants us dead, and it won't settle until we do. And that's why I had to, you know, I had to just surrender that I'm going to struggle with this, or not struggle, I guess, but this is going to be a part of my life until the day I die. But it can be arrested if we do the work and we do what is suggested. And, you know, the more we go through it, the more tools we learn to deal with it and cope with it. And, you know, I can be 100% honest sitting here tonight that I'm still going to lose more people in this program. I'm still going to lose loved ones. And, you know, we have the tools and we have, you know, the fellowship to help us get through it. And, you know, I made that promise to my dad when he went into the cross cancer that I wouldn't let anything take me back out. And, you know, my word didn't mean anything when I came in. And, you know, I lost all the trust in everybody because all I did was lie. So when I make a promise to somebody now, I don't break it. And that's thanks to this program, because it taught me honesty. It taught me respect. It taught me, you know, if I say I'm going to do something, it taught me to follow through with it. So, you know, I'm not going to break that promise, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep it. So I'll end it there. Thanks, Milan.
Awesome, Kyle. Andrew, you want to ask me a question now?
Absolutely, absolutely. So reservations obviously in recovery are like those thoughts and feelings and experience that can hold us back from achieving goals and things like that. So and reservations can be normal, right? But they can also lead to a relapse if not addressed. So what are some of the best coping skills that you use personally to make sure that you can overcome those reservations to not have that relapse occur?
So I remember the first time one of my friends had a relapse from the treatment center, and I definitely spiraled for a few days of just sadness for sure. Like it really hit me hard. I was I just whatever it was the first kind of like fallen soldier in the battle kind of thing, and it's always made me double down on my program. Like it made me look at where I'm weak in what I'm doing with my program. And I consistently try to use things like that, like I'm sure I have some invisible reservations like Mike was mentioning earlier, but the ones that I had, I feel like, for now I've addressed them. And part of that is, really trying to focus on living in the solution, you know, focusing on focusing on my recovery, not focusing on my addiction or the lack of substance use, like right now I'm down here in Mexico, right? Like this was a massive party place for me, and it's a massive party place for other people right now. And the thing I'm really enjoying is that I'm not feeling like I have some reservation about having fun here and music, you know? Like I'm having so much fun here with no music. And it, it's something that I wouldn't have even considered possible 2 years ago. And so, I think just keeping myself involved with my program, even, maintaining what service I could when I lost service, trying to do my service the other day, keeping in contact with my sponsees and just really working on my program itself.
Did you
Yeah,
have
I
any
think,
reservations before you went? Did you have any like nervousness going down there before you headed down there?
the last time I was here 2 years ago, I white knuckled it and had no program. And I still had fun, but I had that resentment for the people that I was quitting for at the time. Like I was like this internal angriness with them because I wasn't partying for them, you know. And now that it's for me and I'm this, like a couple years, whatever, almost a year and a half here into it, I'm, I wondered how it would be. I'll say that I wondered how it would be, but I wasn't afraid of it. And when I showed up, it hasn't been anything, and there was like three friends from recovery that were here as well, and like one of them earlier in their program than me, and they were admitting to me they were like, there was a couple confusing points, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and like instantly anytime like I was literally walking on the beach yesterday morning and saw a 3/4 full bag of one of my old DOCs like right at my feet, and I just looked down and I just like pushed it more into the sand so that it would be gone. I kept walking, so
Good for
you
you,
know
man.
yeah,
Oh,
so
that's
that
cool.
that felt good. Yeah, and
That's
so
awesome, man.
I'm really happy where I'm at with it all. Like it's just like um a state of neutrality,
Yeah,
you know, where like I'm not gonna hassle you for having your fun there, and don't hassle me for having my own type
yeah.
of fun now.
That's
Yeah.
cool. You could have confidence going into it though, like that, even though you had a little bit of, a hairy situation maybe last time where you had some reservations. That's cool, man. That's growth. That's growth, right?
Well, and there was no program in my life at that time, right? Like
Now we
I
have growth.
literally hadn't even entered the room, and the program
Yeah,
and the tools and the steps, they make all the difference on my ability
for
for
sure.
joy and serenity in my sobriety. No questions asked. Yep.
Sure. All right, I'll ask you, Mikey. So obviously reservations can be normal, but they can also lead to a relapse if unaddressed. So, how do you overcome reservations today?
You were talking about the literature. I'm real big on it too, man. There's a reading at every meeting that says this program is a set of principles written so simply. If they're written, I should probably read. Um, can't recover from something I don't understand, and if I don't understand the program I'm in, how the hell am I supposed to even try to understand recovering from addiction? And you know, it says, in that same thing that I was talking about earlier, it says we got to expose them here and now. You know, we are each other's eyes and ears. I can't get better. I can't get through any of the shit that I'm going through unless I tell you guys what I'm going through so that you can help me through it. Right. And then that's the second part of it. Right. So, and I'll ask guys that I take through the steps, just like when we're going over step one, I'll be like, the first two words of steps 1 and 5 are the same. What is the definition of the word admit? Right? And it's always the same thing, you know, to make an honest admission. You know, hi, I'm fucked up, or hi, I'm in, you know what I mean? Expose it. Yeah, that's part of it, right? But words have more than one definition. And the second definition of admit is to allow entrance. Right? You get that movie ticket stub back, it says admit 1 to allow entrance. So I have all of everything that I've ever needed, right? 35 days from now will be 4,000 days. I've had everything I've needed to get through any situation that life has thrown at me, right? I've got connections that are genuine, that are authentic, with people that literally don't self-centeredly want anything from me, huh? And all, you know, secure in the love of the fellowship, right? Will come in, and maybe you guys can identify with this, right? Come in, pour my heart out on the table, and then I got to go smoke, run out the door. You know what I mean? And totally block out God's blessing to me by allowing you guys to love on me and help me and allow entrance, right, of the love of the fellowship to get me through it. Damn, man. You know, like all of the shit that went down that year, I was in meetings, like, and then it came down to the virtual platform, and I watched people go off the rails because I can't go to a meeting on my phone. I'm like, you got no problem being at a meeting on your phone. And you know, it's just bullshit excuses that the disease is making shiny. But the problem is I ain't blaming the goddamn disease, huh? And I'm not going to allow you to blame the disease either after you just told me you have step work under your belt. Because if you have a first step under your belt, it doesn't say we are powerless. It says we were. So no more blaming the goddamn disease for your shitty decisions, Mike. And you know, so like I have to I got to tell the truth though. I got to tell the truth. And I got to realize there's a difference between being honest and telling the truth. You know what I mean? And but I got to let you guys help me through it, man. And again, you know what I mean? Well, I've got this much clean time. I've been through this before, and you know this and that, and I should be further along. All this stupid shit that goes through my head to get me to keep my mouth shut, right? And my last sponsor taught me, he's like, the disease of addiction only needs 2 things to get you hostage. That's a secret and a lie. And that's got you. And the longer we keep our mouth closed, you think that phone's fucking heavy to pick up? Try opening your mouth every day that you keep that secret another day longer, huh? Your fucking jaw feels like it's wired shut until you want to call and get some hookers. And right, I'm going to go with the hookers that aren't in the rooms and justify beating on the still suffering addict because they're not at meetings. I've had guys that I sponsor come to me with that one. I'm like, you went nice justification. Take it to somebody else. Right.
Yeah.
You know, I'll open my mouth when I wanted to call an ex-girlfriend. I'll open my mouth, right, when I had 3 years clean, then I didn't want to deal with the pain of the spiritual and emotional crisis I was going through, right? So I opened my mouth to stuff it full of little Debbies and almost committed suicide with 3 years fucking clean by eating myself to death and putting on 100 pounds in 90 days. Ended up in a goddamn gurney, right? Almost dead with diabetes, right? You know, open my mouth to call the wrong person. Phone don't weigh 1,000 pounds. It barely even weighs fucking 1. Huh? And if you really think it's that heavy, that's why we got 2 hands. Listen, I got one of my best friends because of this platform is over in Aberdeen, Scotland. He don't have the luxury of having 2 hands. The disease took one of them. Right? He still hit me up. Bawling his eyes out, screaming, whatever it is, right? And him and I have been close since we all had to start meeting like this on these damn Hollywood squares, right? But we developed an intimate connection, right? And our spirits connected. And like him and I have been through breakups, we have been through death, we've screamed at each other, not like towards each other, but with each other and shit, gotten through it, man. But you guys have all talked about it, right? Unity is a must, man, right? The opposite of addiction is connection. Connection starts with unity. What are the first three letters of unity? Go ahead and say
You
it
and
out loud.
you and
Right.
I.
That's right. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I just went on
It
a
did, man.
tangent.
That was perfect. That was perfect. All right, Kyle, it's coming to you, man. Reservations can be normal, but they can also lead to relapse if left unaddressed. How do you overcome those reservations today? What are your practices?
I don't like going last. How am I supposed to follow Mike? Wow. Um, what are some things that I do to deal with them and get through them? Mike nailed it on the head there. Opening my fucking mouth at the end of the day. You know, that's what it comes down to. And for the longest time, we were addicts. We didn't want people to know what we were going through. There's a reason we did drugs, and that was to cover it up. That was to get the hell away from it. And, you know, I said it in the first podcast that Milan and Andrew had me on. And the way I deal with things today is I recover out loud. And I'm a firm believer in that. I will argue till I'm blue in the face. Some people don't agree with that. You know, they figure that recovery should just be talked about in the rooms. That's not true for me. I believe that recovery should be talked about in the rooms, be talked about in the parking lot after the meetings. It should be talked about in work. It should be talked about in your relationships. Because if you don't talk about your recovery and you don't talk about what you're going through, people don't know. And, you know, if you're in a relationship with somebody that's not in recovery and, doesn't have addiction problems, how are they supposed to know what you're going through if you don't talk about it? Same with my mom and dad. They didn't, my dad didn't even know what hard drugs were. He passed away at 77 years old. And, I talked to him about recovery right up until the day he passed, and he still didn't understand the whole drug side of things. He knew about the alcohol side of things. He had a drinking problem for the longest time, half of my recovery. And he stood up on my 5-year birthday and admitted he was an alcoholic. And the only reason he did that was because I recovered out loud. I was verbal about my recovery. I talked about it honestly and openly with my parents. And, my dad came to meetings with me. My dad came to my birthday meetings with me. And if I didn't welcome him into that, he probably wouldn't have stood up at my 5-year birthday and admitted that he had a drinking problem. But because he did that and because I recovered out loud, he passed away sober. And, he was able to talk about reservations that he had and whatnot after he got sober. And, I was the first person he would come to. And he had gone through some stuff before I was born, and, he hadn't dealt with that. And that was one of the reasons why he used alcohol as an escape. And, he used it just as I used drugs to escape. And it was a coping mechanism. And, you know, dealing with reservations today comes down to me recovering out loud. And, whether it's with people at work, with, you know, my bosses, friends outside of the program. I do it because it holds me accountable. You know, they know what to look for. And, you know, I'm a pretty vocal person today, and I'm passionate about a lot of things, and my recovery is one of them. And, you know, I've had numerous people that I've worked with on the pipeline and the oil field industry that have come, they've reached out to me because they wanted to get clean. And it was because I was open, honest, and verbal about my recovery. And it shows that, you know, this program works. And that's 95% what my social media is today is, you know, recovery. And, you know, I have people that reach out to me today when I share something on Facebook or, you know, whatever it may be, because they read a quote or they watch a video that I share and they reach out to me to see if I'm okay. And, you know, I've said it before, just because I share it on social media don't mean I'm going through it, because you don't know who needs to see it. But I do it because this program works. And, you know, like I said, I've had people reach out to me that I worked with, and that helps control my reservations, you know. It helps me to be able to cope with them. And like you said, reservations aren't a bad thing. They're a part of life. And it's the same with defects of character, like it says in the literature. But when we do a set of steps and we do a step 4 and we do that fearless moral inventory and we deal with our character defects and our fears and, you know, the other few things that are in step 4, it helps us to get rid of them. So the more I'm verbal about my recovery and, you know, what I'm going through, the more it helps to not keep me sick. And you talking about reservations to people, and, you know, especially the ones close to me, they know what to watch for. And, you know, I said it the first time when I was on here was recovering out loud comes down to accountability for me. Because if somebody sees me acting different than I normally would, they usually call me on my shit. And they usually call me on my shit before it gets to the point that I'm going to do something stupid. And today, if I'm not honest about something, I have this weird thing called a conscience now. And it eats me alive until I do deal with it. And I didn't know what that was before, you know? I had covered up my feelings for so long with, you know, drugs and using, that when I got out of treatment and I just did something as simple as reading a newspaper and, you know, seeing an article about a bad car accident and a young kid getting killed or something like that, I'd just start crying. Because I didn't, you know, these feelings were coming out. And, you know, guilt is a big one for me today. Because if I do something that I know is wrong, it'll eat me up. And that's probably one of the best things that came out of the program. And I hear people all the time talk about how guilt is a bad thing. No, guilt is a good thing for me today, because it it allows me to get the shit out, and because today I know right from wrong. So that was a little bit more of a loaded answer, but hopefully that answered your question, Andrew.
Yes, it did, man. Yes, it did. It answered it very well. And you talked about the different, because I wanted to hit you. You made me think of something. You talked about the different stages of guilt and grief. And I just want to hit on the different stages of grief before I answer this, because I wanted when I was doing some research about it, there's anticipatory grief, grief that occurs before death, normal grief, the common type of grief that occurs after a loss, complicated grief, grief that lasts longer than normal grief, inhibited grief, when someone repossesses their emotions, which can lead to physical symptoms like anxiety, panic attacks, or upset stomach, which I think we deal with that in recovery. Um, Cumulative grief, when someone is grieving multiple losses at once. Collective grief, when a group grieves a shared loss experience of a major event. And ambiguous loss, when the loss is unclear or unconfirmed. There's just that's a lot of grief, a lot of different layers to that grief piece, man. But yeah, with that being said, God, I loved everything that you guys said. You know, I heard a couple things early on in recovery, that pain shared is pain lessened, right? And then share about everything and use about nothing. And that was something that really was important with me early on in recovery. Um, you know, the resentment piece, or excuse me, the reservation piece, and how I deal with that. Like, I've got to put my stock in the program, right? Like I put a lot of stock early on in the people of this program, which I do put stock in people of this program, but like, people are flawed, right? People are just people, and people are going to let you down. But this program will never let you down. You know, this program, the principles that you learn as a result of working this program, they will never let you down. And so I got to stay. There's a couple of things I got to do when I have a reservation, right? I got to admit that I have the reservation, right? That's the first thing, is admit that I have it. And I have to be clear headed enough to know that I have it. Right. So I can't be using drugs. It's the first thing. And I got to be in these rooms learning some shit about myself. Right. So I got to admit that I have the program. I got to understand why I'm having that reservation, and try to break it down, try to break that reservation down a little bit. Um, you know, figure out how to, you know, how to get rid of it if I can. If I can get rid of it in any way, get rid of it. Step work, right? Through step work. Um, Kyle talked about it. You know, recovering out loud, just sharing about it with my peers. You know, I gotta share about it with my peers, my peers in recovery, because they're gonna understand and they're gonna have a way to help grieve with me, right? You know, never, NA stands for never alone, never again, right? It says that in our literature somewhere. So, you know I'm never alone going through something, regardless of where I'm at in the world. And then, you know, finding role models, sponsors, things like that, people that you can that you can hang your hat on when you come up to these reservations, that you can try to get them addressed immediately, or at least figure out why you're having them. And then obviously sharing, you know, with others. But a big thing is that sharing out, you know, recovering out loud piece, Kyle. But another thing I got to do is I got to practice mindfulness. I got to stay mindful, right? Um, you know, I've got to be non-judgmental, you know, in my decisions and in my actions. I got to be patient. You know, I got to practice patience. You know, I got to trust. I got to put trust in it. Like I just said, trust in the program. It's not really trust in the people. The people will let you down, but the program will not ever let you down. You know, your God of your understanding will not let you down. You know, and then that acceptance piece, Milan. Here we go with I got to practice acceptance in this thing, man. You know, with the reservations. So, or excuse me, my reservations. So yeah, you know, patience and being present. I got to stay present. Look, because if I'm not present, I'm not tapped into that God of my understanding. Right. If I'm not present, I'm not consciously contacted with him. And so I can get outside of myself quick if I'm not staying in that present moment. You talked about it, you know, guilt, shame, and remorse, Kyle. That shit'll kill you, man. You know, guilt, shame, and remorse. So I've got to be, you know, I got to be mindful, man. I got to be mindful what's ahead. I got to be mindful of what's behind, not put too much stock in yesterday or tomorrow, but be mindful of what's coming down the pike. Because if not, I can get hit with a really tough one that I didn't know was going to hit me that day. And then I can do something stupid really quick. Right. And so and it's all about preventive maintenance, doing all those things that I just kind of hit on. Preventive maintenance on a daily, we got that step 10. I love that step 10 minute because it allows me to do that daily inventory and lay there at night and go, man, where did I fuck up today? Did I do anything that's going to allow me to create a reservation down the road? Reservations breed resentment. We don't want to have any of that, or I don't. I know all four of us here don't. So, staying mindful. Mindful listening. All that shit plays into not having reservations, man. Because all those little things for an addict snowball into us just wanting to blow the shit up. Real easy. And I'm hearing people with 30, 40 years clean going out, man. Like, for what? And I don't know what, and just recently, 32, 33 years ago, I heard 40, 41 years clean going out for what? Just, I don't even, so I know, first off, I'm in the right place because I have a lot of my predecessors that have a lot of that clean time and they're still in these meetings. Like our sponsor, Mikey, sits in these meetings just as much as we do. Just got to hear it. I know I'm in the right place. But like, what the hell is going on with these people that are, gosh, I know I got to stay on my toes, man. I don't give a shit how much clean time I got. I got to stay on my toes. I got to share about everything, use about nothing, man. Or, or what the fuck am I doing? Willingness without action is fantasy. I got to be willing to kind of do the work. If I'm not going to do any work, I'm not going to read this literature and I'm not going to read the simple shit that tells me that I don't have to believe in Jesus with long hair. Why am I here? Right? Like all the little shit that if you don't read about it, then you're not here. Right? Like if you're not reading about these things, you're not doing this work, you're just sitting in here getting a court slip signed, then like good luck. Good luck and noticing what's coming down the pike, or like when a problem hits you, what are you gonna call the Ghostbusters when something happens? Like who are you gonna call? Right? Like I'm it's y'all laugh because we've all been there where we're like, yeah, we've got it going on, but we didn't have nothing going on, man. Until you really get knee deep in this thing, you get yourself involved with service to not co-hosting a meeting, but involved with service and community to other people. Then you're not gonna want to do any of this. You're not gonna be proactive in this thing, and your brain will catch up. That disease way of thinking is gonna catch up. It's gonna trample over you, and you're gonna get eaten up with it, man. I see it. I see it in my predecessors. I see it with kids that can't get over 100 days clean to save their fucking life, but got it all at their grip. You know what I mean? Like we can't do it for them. So I gotta stay tapped into the program. Gotta stay tapped into my guys, my gals that are my support network that call me on my bullshit, right? Mikey and Kyle guy, like if we really want to work this program, we're gonna surround ourselves with people that are gonna fucking be like, bro, what the hell are you doing? If you got a bunch of your buddies in here that are like just like giggle when you do something stupid in a meeting, you're not here. What are you doing? You're not here for the right reasons. That's not what we're doing. We're not here to like giggle and have fun. Yeah, we have fun in recovery, but we're staying clean, man. We're grinding through this thing. It's not about fun, like jokes and little kitty thing. You know what I mean? Like that's not what it's about. Yeah, we want to show you we're having fun in this thing, but we're surrounding ourselves with grown ass men, grown ass women that are doing this thing and are serious about this thing, because we don't. Time is of the essence here, man. We don't have a lot of time yet left, and we can go out like that, man. So we don't, if when we get a grateful addict does not use, gotta stay grateful, right? And part of that is staying without these reservations on a daily basis, without them building up, without these constant resentments building, right? And loving the next man. Why are you gonna hate? Why are you gonna hate on somebody and communicate with them in a negative way? We just prayed them in here. So, all right, Milan, you're up, man.
All right. That was awesome, everybody. So I'm going to ask a question, and that'll probably take us right through to the end. I bet everybody will have done a round of questions. So I'm going to ask you, Mike. I'm going to do a little read and then a question at the end of it. We may never understand why some of us live long, full lives, and some of us are gone so early. For many of us, the answers we find in the steps carry us through the very real moments of doubt, but they are very particular and can be very different for each of us. The grief process forces us to make peace with unanswered questions, and in that way, it is a gift. Have you experienced any passage through grief as a gift? If so, how or how not?
Oh, boy.
Well, I knew it'd be.
So, yeah, I feel like, here it comes. So I feel like from, the beginning of 2020 to into 2021, I've never experienced or been that close to death. And you know what I mean? It's been somebody died in a car accident to, not too long ago, I was standing at, the foot of the bed of a, 18-year-old girl that died of cancer when she took her last breath with her father, who I've sponsored since, I don't know for how long now. And, you know what I mean? It's just been all these crazy things. So, also with the line of work that I do, lost hundreds of clients to death over the years for different things. And it's not figuring out to not have survivor's guilt. And I had somebody, come at me with some stuff, because the 1 year anniversary was a few weeks, I mean, not the 1 year, the 4 year anniversary was a few weeks ago of like the most tragic death I've ever experienced. And he was like, why are you carrying that and blaming yourself for it? I'm like, dude, I'm fucking hurting. I don't blame myself for any of it. So like managing like my part in it, which is to me is practical application of the first step, and really believing in it, because like when the powerlessness and the acceptance over the disease of addiction that lives right here, right? If I can make it sound good, hopefully I can make it look good in my spirit, because when I can do that, when something happens, because it's a part of life, like we're all gonna fucking die, right? And it's gonna fucking hurt, right? And like, yeah, and I remember early on, like people dying of all the overdoses and shit. And I asked the sponsor one time, I'm like, why is it like that I'm really fucked up that this girl we just lost, like she died in a car accident, and I'm more fucked up over that than somebody that I was a lot closer with for a lot longer died of an overdose. He goes, well, you have something to blame it on, right? He's like, you fucking caught that up to the disease of addiction. Fuck the disease of addiction. You know what I mean? Where he goes, but a goddamn car accident? Who are you gonna blame it on now? You know what I mean? And usually that blame comes in for the family, you know what I mean? People that were the closest, because you know, maybe it's just me, but like when I'm hurt, if I can blame one of you for it, it kind of makes me feel a little better, but it doesn't do a goddamn thing to help me heal. You know what I mean? And then I'll just lash out at you with anger and be a total dick to you about it, and like I'm just getting sicker. So I kind of lost where I was going here with that, but so like turning it into a blessing, right? Okay, so like let's get started, right? The pandemic hits, the stay-at-home order happens in April, and a couple weeks into April, you know, like we're really everybody's like, are you kidding me? Like, I don't know. We're still gonna try to have meetings, but the meeting places were like, we're gonna limit numbers. We can't do this, whatever, yada yada. A friend of mine had just celebrated a year. He was around for a few years. Went to prison after he relapsed. Come back. I presented him with a medallion. He's moving down to town, to an Oxford house where another friend of ours is living, and he brings his last load down, and it has somebody drive his truck down, and he goes out and comes down on his motorcycle, pulls in. You know, the other kid comes running out, they hop on their bikes and take off like a bat out of hell. They don't even make it a mile down the road. Car pulls out, they're going too fast, skid marks 100 feet long. They both hit the car. One's dead on arrival, one, they shut off the life support 2 days later, right? Cripples the entire community. These are just two beautiful young men that everybody loved. They were highly involved with everything, right? So that starts a ball rolling. Starts the ball rolling. And it begins. And now we're all locked down you know, people can't even go to work, all this shit's going on. And, you know, so like everybody was really fucked up about that. Our sponsor, a guy that sponsored a shitload of us, had moved out of state. He comes back, right? And he's there with us, and like the ball just starts rolling and people start dying. There's car accidents, all of this shit's going on. Another guy that I sponsored went out and did some research, and they're like, we need to do an intervention on his ass. So I was like, listen, I'm a fucking sponsor to this man. Like, you want to do intervention, call him up and have the TV show come here and fucking do it. I'm not doing it because I know this guy well, and it's not going to go well. And they convinced me to come along, and I was the only person that didn't say shit the whole time, and he was getting mad. And like, I remember him looking at me, and like, I talked to him afterwards, and he's like, no, I wasn't mad at you. He goes, I knew why you weren't saying anything. The guys there were getting mad at me. You know what I mean? Like, I can scream till I'm blue in the face, right? A week later, you know, he did his last one. He left behind wife and child. And so like it keeps going. My mom is now at the end of life services. My entire family walks away, right? I got three older sisters. God bless them. They have their own things that they're dealing with our childhood or whatever. I'm the only one, right? I had done my amends years ago with her when I had a couple years clean. I thought I'm good. I changed the behavior. I stopped stealing her pills. I stopped fucking skimming money. You know what I mean? Stopped doing all this shit. And, you know, lo and behold, right, we make plans, God laughs, God shows up and says, no, now you're going to go do the amends. And I had to go through so much red tape. I'm working full time. I'm in school full time. I'm doing all this stuff. And every waking moment I had, I was taking care of my mom, who couldn't go more than 24 hours without phone. Right. And so like we're going along, and like, it's just total madness, and I'm out of my mind. And, like, we finally get her. She has another fall. She's in the hospital. They call me up on a Tuesday. They're like, come sign the papers. Like, it's the last ones. Finally convinced her to go into a home. I'll be able to come see you. Like, I'm not going to abandon you. It's 5 minutes from my house. Sign the papers. And I got a sponsee with me. We leave the hospital. We don't even make it 5 minutes from the hospital. They call. They're like, your mom had a bout with her heart, and we need to have a conference call. Can you pull over? So I stopped the car. She said she had had enough and she wanted to go on palliative care. And I said, how long does this take? They're like, it could be hours. It could be a couple of days. We go out, we clean out her apartment, and I sat right there with her. I prayed with her. I had sponsees in the room with me coming up. You know, it was beautiful, right? I got relief when my mom died. Right, I was there for the last 4 months of her life. All I ever prayed for was that she didn't die afraid, she didn't die in pain, and she didn't die alone. Right, and I was able to stay right there with her. And all of those came true. And another prayer was for me, was that I didn't want any guilt or shame. And I got a lot of relief because mom didn't suffer. Like, I watched her decay spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Right, so that was it. And like, I did everything that I could. So then, like, there's more car accidents, there's more overdoses. There was about 5 men that, most of them sponsored by name, but a couple of them I was close with, some really close friends. They just kept dying, right? And like, my world's shrinking in, and I'm just jumping on the Zoom platform, and I'm going to meetings all over the world. I got them in my earbuds, you know what I mean, all the time. I just didn't want to feel alone. And I get up one morning, and this was the icing on the cake. This is the pain that I shared about that. See, you know, Andrew was talking about the drugs aren't the problem, right? We gotta ask ourselves what brought us to the drugs, and I call that the original pain, right? And I'm sure we'll get into that some other time, but right now I want to talk about this, right? So this next thing I'm about to bring up, and I'll wrap this up, is that the pain that I feel today, 4 years and a couple weeks later, hurts just as bad as it did when I got the call. And this hurts. The only thing I can identify this hurt with is the original pain, right? The original pain. And I get up, I go to check my notifications on social media. I'm scrolling, and Dano had relapsed, right? Just after I presented him with a 2-year medallion. We were real close in sponsorship, real close. He had saved my life through some stuff that I had previously gone through. through step work and everything, just a level of intimacy you don't get, I've never experienced with anybody else other than sponsorship. And there's a video of him on social media, and it's kind of dark, and I can't really understand what he's saying. Something happens, and I got to put my phone down. I pick it up, I race to my office, I get ready for the day, I pick my phone up, that video is the first thing on my news feed. I didn't know why it kept being the first thing on my news feed. It was popular, apparently. I wanted to know what was going on. So I'm trying to pay attention, and he's saying some stuff. My office phone rings. I didn't know what was going on. Now I do, right? My God was intervening. I wasn't supposed to see that video. And I left work early that day. And I came out of Walmart, and I had 2 missed calls from his sister and a voicemail. She had never called me back to back ever. And she had definitely never left me a voicemail before, and I just knew. And she said they had found his body that morning, and that she said, don't go on Facebook. There was a live feed of him committing suicide. And how I was taught by my first sponsor that you gotta find gratitude in the bad situations, because that's the only reason we have good situations and good days. How the fuck do you find gratitude in something like that? And right, I said his sister called me. Since this whole fucking ordeal happened, I've gone from speaking, well, these podcasts now, right, all over the world because of Zoom, but all up and down the East Coast in multiple states, all this stuff, right, being a speaker to speaking at funerals, right? I've done that more than once now. A couple of the people that died that year. How do I find the blessing in that? And sponsorship goes deeper than sponsored. When I was allowing my sponsee to help me in a time that I was scared and I was hurting and I was doing something for the first time ever in my life, right? And he was in my back pocket. I was at his house just about every day if he wasn't at my house. And I would see his son there, and I would see his son's mother there, right? She's not one of us. His son isn't. His son's just a little boy. But I started developing a relationship with him. And he talked to his family about it all the time, right? How do I turn all of this into a blessing? Just because he's not here, I can still be his sponsor. And I'll tell you, I'm gonna read this to you because this just came through like just before 6 o'clock. I get a random text message. It's from a little boy named Eli that just turned 8 years old. He says, I miss you. And I love you. And then he sends me audio recordings talking to me about how much he loves me and misses me. And that's Dano's son, right? Because I still show up for him. Like I bought that little boy his first motorcycle because he saw me showing up on my motorcycle and he wanted to have one too, right? I talk to his sister regularly. I talk to his girlfriend regularly. I talk to his son and his son's mother regularly. I'm friends with his family on social media and we check in with one another. How do I turn such, I can't explain the pain into a blessing? I show the fuck up for these people and give them something that is a piece of him. Because they knew what I meant to him and they know what he meant to me, and it's a piece of him showing up. And when I get that from them, right? That little boy needs somebody in his life that he knows was daddy's best friend. That's why he loves me, right? Those 2 guys that died on the motorcycle, when we go in and share our pain, it's not just pain lessons for us, it's pain lesson for somebody in the goddamn room that doesn't know how to deal with it, that doesn't think they can stay clean through it, right? It has nothing to do with me. Grieving is a very selfish process, huh? When you graduate college, we fucking are happy as hell for you. When you buy a new, we throw you a housewarming party. right? And a lot of people's belief system is similar, that when the body dies, their spirit goes home. Why aren't we fucking happy for them? That's the ultimate freedom from the disease of addiction, right? That's the ultimate 11th step, right? They can't improve on their conscious contact with the God of their understanding anymore. It's at an ultimate, huh? And how do I do that as a blessing? It fucking hurts like hell, but I just keep showing up. And I've had people tell me, maybe you need to stop fucking sharing and just shut up, and literally say this to me. I never taken that suggestion. I've had a couple of sponsors over the time I've been here, but I've gone to them with it. You know what they told me? They're like, go to that meeting tomorrow night, put your hand up as soon as they open the meeting, and share it again.
Share that shit.
And you share about it until you don't need to share about it anymore.
Yeah.
And you know what? You know what? I stay clean, and somebody always comes up and says, holy fuck, how you, like, bawling, slobbering, snot hanging fucking mess in a meeting. I don't care if it's virtual or live. But I share that pain, and it lessens it for somebody else every goddamn time. And that's a blessing, to help somebody stay clean. For listen, NASA is the smartest people on the planet working for them, and they can't get a goddamn addict to stop using. But I can go in and use death of someone I loved as a fucking push to keep an addict clean. Come on, man. You
Hell
can't
yeah.
get that shit nowhere else. I'll shut up with that. Thank you.
Love
I
that,
think,
Mike. I love you, Mike.
bro, I
Mr.
love you,
Cal
man.
P. Mr. Cal P.
You're gonna,
So have you experienced any of the passage through grief as a gift? If so, how or how not?
I just received it with what Mike shared. Literally.
I'm that snotty nosed guy that he's just talking about when he gets done with his share. I'm that snotty nosed addict. Like, fuck, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm that guy that comes up to him after the meeting and says, thanks for sharing that.
I need your number now.
Yeah. You know, that's the blessing of this fucking program right there, you know. The blessings of grief, you know. I want to say, you know, I've never been much of a religious person. I grew up religious, you know, I went to church with mom and dad, but, you know, over the time that religious went to spiritual. And, you know, that's why this program is such a perfect program for me, is because, you know, NAAA, whichever fellowship you go to, it doesn't matter. It says right in the literature, this is a spiritual program, not a religious program. And, you know, that really rung true when I lost dad. And, you know, I've always been that person, you know, 1111 shows up, you make a wish, you know. Um, you know, I've gotten big into the numerology, and, you know, when numbers show up and, you know, continue to show up, and the dimes from heaven, you know, as our society goes on, you know, we stop using cash and like start using bank cards more often. And, you know, for myself, I don't carry cash very often. And coming up on 3 years, March 4th of losing dad, you know, I'm still finding dimes. And I find dimes on the hard days. And, you know, the other day, you know, it was a bit harder of a day emotionally. You know, something good happened and I wanted to pick up that phone. I wanted to call dad. And I even had, you know, I even picked up the phone and I dialed his number and not even thinking about it. And, you know, I was emotional as it was. And then as soon as I hit that last number, I was like, fuck. And, you know, about a half hour after that, I got home, and the rental that I'm staying in, you know, I don't think I've had cash in my pocket since I rented this place 3 months ago. And I walked into the bedroom, there's a dime on the floor. And then I got washed up after work, and I go to open the door of the truck. There's a dime on the floor down by the brake pedal. And I'm a firm believer that, when a person passes away, their spirit lives on. And, I felt him with me. They say, I had a couple people in the program tell me, if you watch for those signs, you'll see them. And, I've shared it in meetings that Andrew and Milan have been on. I was working in Houston, BC on the last pipeline I was on before I came up to Fort St. John. And, we'd ride the bus out to the line every day and kept seeing this eagle sitting at the same spot every morning. He'd sit on this piece of driftwood along the river. And then we'd get out to the line, I'd be in my machine, and the eagle would fly over. And then we'd drive back to camp that evening. The eagle would be right back on that same piece of wood. And then I came up to Fort St. John, and I was running water truck, and right along the river where I'd fill up the truck with water, up in the tree, there was an eagle. And that was on my first day when I started this new job at this new site. 8 hours away. And that eagle showed up every single day. And that eagle is still sitting there. I've unfortunately not at that job anymore. I moved on to another job, and I'm 2 hours north of Fort St. John. And for the last 5 days of this new job, we were on a lease reclaiming it. And lo and behold, what's sitting in a tree? A fucking eagle.
That's awesome.
Just gives me goosebumps. But I'm a firm believer in when you pass away, you come back as something else. Now, I can't say for sure if Dad came back as an eagle, but coincidence, I think not. But that eagle has followed me around for the last year in 3 different places I've worked. Now, if that ain't a blessing of grief, I don't know what is, because it even shows up on the good days, but it shows up even more on the bad days. And, the eagle is the symbolization of, I looked it up the other day, but, eagles will show up when you need strength.
I would say strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Man.
it just, like, I literally have goosebumps right now. And
I do too, man.
Spirituality is a real thing, and it's helped me get through so much. And, me and Mom were sitting at their farm about 3 months after Dad passed, and, we were talking about the things that you don't really want to talk about after somebody passes away, and especially, your mom's husband, your dad, and, keeping the acreage, selling the acreage. And I literally brought up selling the acreage, and the fucking doorbell rang. Not a fucking soul around. And about a month after that, we had some family over at my house, and it was my dad's birthday. And we ordered pizza. Doorbell goes off. Pizza gets dropped off. We sit down at the table. We dish out the pizza. We sit down. The doorbell goes off. Not a person around. Like, Dad was one that liked to play tricks and pranks. And
He was hungry, man. He was hungry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was.
Oh,
And then we have his favorite dessert. And yeah, that was when the doorbell went off. A
he
second
said, "What's
time.
my name, Skip? What's my name,
Yeah.
Skip?" Come on, man.
You can look at grief 2 ways. You can sit in it and go down that rabbit hole. You can let it drag you down, or you can look at it as a blessing and pull the strength from it. And that's what I choose to do today, you know. That man was my best friend. We'd talk on the phone 6, 7 times a day. And, you know, he'd phone me. Didn't matter if he had something to tell me or he just wanted to tell me how much he won on his lottery tickets or lost on his lottery tickets. But that phone rang. And, you know, those are the things I won't take for granted today. And, you know, I'm also a huge believer that once a loved one passes away, they put people in our path for a reason. You know, I'm also a huge believer that, you know, God will put people in our life when we need them the most. And then when a loved one passes away, you know, they put people in our life when we need them the most. And, you know, I wouldn't say I've been in a bad spot, but, you know, since losing dad, you know, I kind of, you know, I've started looking at, kind of starting to wonder what my purpose in life was. And, you know, there was so many times that I should have been dead, and I'm still here today. And it makes you think, you know, what was I put on earth to do that I haven't done, that I'm still here? And, you know, it it came to me the other day, you know, somebody came into my life a couple months ago, and, you know, I'm a firm believer right now that I think about it every single fucking day that my dad had something to do with this person coming into my life. And, you know, feeling a sense of purpose, you know, my whole life turned around in the last couple months. And, you know, it lit that spark inside me again. And, you know, this person had lost her sister. This person, you know, has so much in common with me, and it's just so, I don't know what the word is, so powerful when you think of it, that, you know, I was struggling and just call it a lost puppy, you know, just waking up every day. I knew what I needed to do, and, you know, I'd get up, go to work. I spend most of my time at work, and, you know, you start to wonder why you work so much. You start to wonder why you spend your life out of town. And then someone comes into your life and you finally feel that purpose, and, you know, why you do what you do, you know. And, you know, I've seen the quote come up so many times in the last couple of months scrolling social media, and, you know, it said, you can have people in your life that you've known 5 years, or you can have somebody come into your life that you've known 2 months and it feels like they've been in your life for 10 years. And, you know, I believe that people come into your life when you need them the most. And, you know, I wouldn't have that if it wasn't for this program. You know, nobody wanted to be around me, especially when I was going through grief, you know, because I didn't know how to deal with it in the beginning, and I would take it out on other people. You know, I couldn't process it. I'd sit in it and then it'd make me angry. And now, you know, the mindset changes that, you know, I'm happy you brought up this question, Milan, because you can look at grief as a blessing and what it brings to you. And, you know, it's a powerful thing. And, you know, it's also rekindled relationships with people that I hadn't talked to in a long time. Those people that I met early in the program that lost their parents, that I reached back out to and rekindled a connection, and now we talk every day. And, you know, it's those blessings. And, you know, does it suck when I lost my best friend who was my dad? Absolutely it does. But has a lot of good things come out of it? Yes, it has. And, it's all about perception and how we look at things. And, I shared it in that podcast we did a month ago about how a bad day only lasts as long as we let it. And I have that choice today.
You do.
And we all have that choice, all four of us. And, that's when I take on a sponsee now, I tell them that right off the hop because, they could barely get through 24 hours. They could barely get through 5 hours.
What this really reminds me is like you can either make yourself miserable, right? Or we can make ourselves strong. Like the amount of work is the same. Right. Like, and grief is a gift, right? Like I was writing a lot of things down as y'all were talking, what it can do is it can deepen one's appreciation for life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, perspective, giving somebody perspective on them being alive versus somebody else not being alive, right? That perspective of like, hey, I appreciate my life that I'm still alive today. Right. Even though I don't have that person in my life, that's where that appreciation can come in. There's like a renewal grief that I was kind of thinking about and looking up, where you can help people realize, remember, and reaffirm and release that emotion, right? And then that intimacy grief. What you can do is you can build intimacy with your God, right? It builds intimacy with that higher power because as you're talking to him, a lot of times when that person will pass, they become part of that higher power, right? For us, it has for me, right? And so, and then obviously we can help use grief to strengthen ourselves, right? And part of that is not trying to view it as a positive experience, but going through the grief, right? Going through that process of pain and grief, and not trying to come up with some positive aspect to it. Like you said, Mikey, sit on your fucking hands and feel it. Sit on your hands and feel it. It's the best way to go. Because what do you want to feel it in little pieces all day? Sit on your fucking hands and get through it and talk about it, right? So it's a natural emotion, man, that arises, right? When we have losses, grief, right? It can be painful, but it can also be helpful. And that's what you guys have reminded me today, right? It's a choice. People need to choose to grieve, right? You can choose to grieve or not. And unresolved grief can lead to some really unhealthy things and outcomes. So we gotta attack it, right? We can't hide from grief. Grief's gonna lead us to a lot of problems, right? Because it can lead to illnesses, right? It can lead to addiction, things like that. So
It can
I'm done. I
lead
just wanted
to
to
acceptance. It can lead to acceptance.
no doubt. I love you guys, man. I'm so glad we're able to pull this thing together, man.
Yeah.
Come on,
I really love
Milan,
you guys.
finishing out with a quick answer for us, buddy.
Tune in next time.
All right. Love you guys, man. Thanks, guys.
Please help us help others. If you'd like what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.